Dinosaurs are so iconic in our collective imagination that they almost feel like they've always been around. But while these extinct reptiles have left an undeniable mark on our planet and our culture, they only tell part of the story. The truth is, there are entire chapters of Earth's history that most of us don't know about, including one that might surprise you the most. Today we're gonna go back to a time when the greatest monsters that ever lived roamed the Earth before the dinosaurs, before any dino ever laid an egg or took its first unsteady steps. What if I told you that Earth had already seen monsters that dwarfed the king of the dinosaurs? In terms of pure size, the largest animals that ever lived called our planet home long before the age of reptiles began. Now, depending on what you define as a monster, some of these creatures were anything but. But from saber-toothed cats the size of bears to meat-eating crocodiles that grew as big as houses, let's take a closer look at the biggest, baddest beasts that ruled the Earth long before the dinosaurs. But before we get into it, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We put out new videos every week exploring the greatest moments in deep time. So join us as we uncover weird, wonderful and sometimes terrifying ancient creatures and the incredible story of the world they inhabited. And stick around after this week's monster feature for even more prehistoric beasties. If you're ready to rumble in the jungle, you can't do much better than the Permian period. Stretching from 299 to 250 million years ago, the Permian was the last period of the Paleozoic Era, which means that according to the International Commission on Zoological Nomenclature, it was also the home of the last zoological monsters. That's a pretty exclusive club. And the Permian doesn't just include the monsters that lived right before the Great Dying, the most significant mass extinction event in history. For all intents and purposes, the Permian was the age of monsters. After all, it was during the latter half of this period that the first dino was born. And you know how we feel about those guys. The Earth was covered in giant amphibians. It was dominated by strange, spiky reptiles, and some mammals were beginning to evolve. But the monsters of the Permian were unlike anything that came after. These creatures got big. We're talking massive meat-eaters over 30 feet long and wide. And the king of the monsters was definitely Dimetrodon. You probably remember this guy from that classic monster movie poster. He's the quintessential monster, even if he wasn't quite as big as some of the other Permian beasties. Dimetrodon was a therapsid, meaning it was part of the group of animals that eventually led to mammals. But it looked nothing like your pet cat. The name Dimetrodon means demigod of the womb. And given its size, 10 to 11 feet long with a huge sail down its spine, it's not hard to see why. The sail is probably the defining feature of the Dimetrodon. And thanks to the show Friends, it's also one of the most recognizable features in all of paleontology. Now, the sail was made up of elongated spines covered in skin. And the Dimetrodon wasn't the only animal to have one. There were also smaller species of Dimetrodon with different colored sails that lived alongside them. And they weren't the only ones sporting the look. Their cousins, the Theriodonts, had their own version of the sail. But not every monster was covered in spikes. Some were downright scaly. And we're not talking about your average garden variety lizard either. We mean something closer to a crocodile, like this guy Prinosuchus. One of the largest amphibious monsters in the Permian, Prinosuchus was a predator, even though its head was more narrow than your typical meat-eater. This croc was a whopping 40 feet long and easily one of the biggest animals on land. Its skull was narrow and flattened from side to side, but it was still equipped with dozens of sharp teeth for crushing bone and blubber. Scientists believe that Prinosuchus spent its time mostly in water. With such a flat skull, it wouldn't have been very good at hunting on land, but it would have been a terror of the seas. As far as we can tell, Prinosuchus was the top predator in the shallow waters of the world's most massive inland sea, but it wasn't the only monster that stalked its waters. One of the most famous monsters of the Permian is also one of the strangest. We're talking about Hallucigenia, one of the most bizarre animals in all of evolutionary history. Now, most of you probably won't need me to tell you what's weird about this creature because you've probably already seen it. If you've seen any photos or illustrations of a member of the Lobopodian family, you already know that there's something a little off about it. It has way too many legs, for one thing. It also has a giant proboscis coming out of its mouth, complete with what looks like a tongue on the end. Oh, yeah, and it's completely backwards. Well, maybe not completely backwards, but enough of its major features are reversed from the way we typically see them that scientists have come up with a few different ways of explaining it. For starters, hallucigenia could have been a true anomaly, a one-of-a-kind creature whose body plan went terribly wrong somewhere along the way. Or it could have been an extreme example of convergent evolution, looking like all the other Lobopodians because it evolved to live a similar lifestyle. Its favorite food was probably soft-bodied marine animals. And with 70 legs ending in suction cups, hallucigenia was perfectly suited to slurp up prey. So, is it a monster? Yeah, I'd say so. But while hallucigenia may have been one of the weirdest monsters, another was one of the deadliest. Smilodon fatalis, aka the saber-toothed cat, is basically synonymous with the Ice Age. But did you know that there were saber-toothed cats in the Permian, too? Smilodon was gigantic, growing to over 6 feet at the shoulder and weighing nearly 800 pounds. That's larger than your average modern grizzly bear. To give you an idea of just how large this cat really was, consider that the largest grizzly bears are only about half as heavy. What's more, Smilodon had the same signature weapon as its more famous descendants, long saber-like fangs that it used to take down its prey. This would have been an extremely effective hunting strategy, allowing the cat to deliver a devastating blow without having to get too close to its target. But being such a big cat didn't come without drawbacks. Like today's big cats, Smilodon probably hunted large prey like deer, bison, and perhaps even early relatives of elephants. But it also required a lot of food to survive. At least 300 pounds of meat every day. This meant that Smilodon needed a ton of calories to keep its huge frame fueled up. No wonder these cats only survived until the end of the Permian. There's no doubt about it. The Permian was full of gigantic, scary monsters. And the older we get, the more we find. Who knows what other monsters once roamed the earth? Maybe one day soon we'll find a real-life dinosaur. Until then, we'll just have to settle for the next best thing. Now, if you want to hear more about some of the truly strange monsters that once walked the earth, check out our episode on the strange case of the Coelophysis. Or click here for another fan favorite. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. And thanks for watching.